Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 933 for March 13th, 2022. Coming up in a few minutes.
It'll be the first time ever that I haven't been in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day. So it's going to be strange. It's also going to be exciting to see the way it's celebrated in America. I've only ever seen it on TV.
Brian Nation made it through his first Minnesota winter after leaving Ireland's Midleton Distillery to join the new O'Shaughnessy Distilling Company in Minneapolis. This Thursday will be a big one as the Keeper's Heart Whiskey team celebrates St. Patrick's Day. Brian joins me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Your Voice, and on Behind the Label.
Often you're paying farmers to drive up and haul your grains for you, where historically it was free to have that occur.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Dewar's brand ambassador Gabriel Cardarella here. And as the weather starts to finally warm, I wanted to remind everyone of one of the best ways to float in a pool with your favorite whiskey. The Dewar's Highball is simple and refreshing. Anyone can make it. Dewar's, ice, club soda, and a citrus garnish is all you need. Cheers.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast. Trying to fit the best of Ireland into one day, huh? Good luck. Takes us at least 12 years. Happy St. Patrick's Day from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Bulmore. We'll start with an update on a story we first reported on back in January on the legal questions over private barrel picks in Kentucky. State lawmakers are working on a bill that satisfies three competing interests, for the most part: the distilleries, wholesale distributors, and retailers. That bill passed in the Kentucky House on Friday and now goes to the Senate for action. It cleans up the regulatory language on private barrel picks that had state regulators nervous, while also allowing for other things that each of the three sides wanted. Under the bill, distilleries would be allowed to have so-called distillery-exclusive bottles that would not be available at retailers, while also allowing distillers to operate satellite tasting rooms. However, distillers would only be able to sell 30% of their private barrel selections directly to consumers from their gift shops. All other sales would have to go through licensed wholesalers and retailers. It also changes the vintage spirits law passed a couple of years ago to limit consumers to selling 24 vintage bottles to licensees each year, and requires the licensees to report those purchases to the state before reselling the bottles. Now, what would that language have to do with private barrel selections? Well, it's one of the things that makes Kentucky politics unique, as Fred Minnick told us Friday night on the Happy Hour Live webcast.
This is the part of Kentucky politics that's not public. It's not very well known. And that is they will only vote on one alcohol bill per year. Like they will only bring one alcohol bill through because the Democrat and Republican leaders basically have a truce that they won't do too much because it might upset the Dry County constituents. You know, if Johnny Bob Preacher ends up supporting too many bourbon bills, Johnny Bob Preacher is going to lose his constituents in Dry County, Kentucky, and that's a very real situation for a lot of those politicians.
In other words, House Bill 500 is like a Christmas tree, with everything the competing interests within the liquor industry wants hanging on it. The Senate has just 2 weeks left in this year's session to act on the bill. In other news, the original owners of Bardstown Bourbon Company have cashed out. They did a deal with the current management team and Pritzker Private Capital to acquire the distillery for an undisclosed amount. Pritzker Private Capital is the investment group for the Chicago-based Pritzker family. It's believed to be the family's first investment in the distilled spirits business, but Bardstown Bourbon executives were not made available for interviews this week. Diageo plans to expand Crown Royal production with a new distillery in Ontario. The facility will be built in St. Clair Township along the border with Michigan, just northeast of Detroit. It will complement the existing Crown Royal Distillery in Gimli, Manitoba. The project is budgeted at $245 million Canadian, that's about $191 million U.S., and will be a carbon-neutral distillery powered by renewable energy. It'll be Diageo's second carbon-neutral distillery in North America, following the Bullet Distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. In Scotland, Diageo has been hit with a fine of £1.2 million by environmental regulators. The Scottish Environmental Protection Agency cited Diageo for not having emissions permits for the Rose Isle and Glenord distilleries and the Burghead Maltings in Elgin. SEPA claimed the three sites were operating without emissions trading scheme permits for 6 years. All three have been in compliance since 2019, and a Diageo spokesperson blamed the lack of permits on an administrative mistake. New whiskeys unveiled this week. Bulmore is releasing a travel retail exclusive, the Bulmore 1965 Precious Metals Edition. Just 4 bottles are being released to mark what was referred to as Bulmore's golden age in the 60s. Each bottle comes in a bespoke box created by John Galvin. They'll be available at the airports in Taipei, Dubai, Hong Kong, and Amsterdam. The price tag, $50,000 each. Irish Distillers is releasing 3 new Method and Madness single pot still whiskeys with a Japanese influence. The flagship of the trilogy is a 33-year-old whiskey finished in Mizunara oak for 3 years. Only 252 bottles will be available worldwide. The price tag is €3,000 each. There are also 2 younger whiskeys finished in Japanese chestnut and Japanese cedar wood casks. They'll be among the first Method and Madness whiskeys to be available in the USA under a new distribution deal. Pernod Ricard USA's Castle Brands unit will now be handling Method and Madness distribution in the U.S. market. Speaking of Japan, Ichiro Akuto is releasing a new Chichibu single malt. Chichibu the Peated 2022 uses barley malted and peated at the distillery. Only 11,000 bottles will be available starting next month. It'll be available through Decanta and other retailers for around $500 a bottle. In the U.S., Michter's is out with its annual release of the US1 Barrel Strength Rye Whiskey. It's a single barrel release that will carry a recommended retail price of $100 a bottle. And finally, speaking of rye, Alberta Premium Rye has been a Canadian favorite for years, but except for the cask strength releases over the last couple of years, it's never been sold in the U.S. until now. It'll be available for $25 a bottle. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and on our social media timelines. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Join me every Friday at 5 p.m. New York time for the Happy Hour live webcast with some of the biggest names in whiskey. This week, don't forget that the U.S. changed to daylight saving time this weekend, so we're on at 2100 hours GMT or 9 p.m. London time outside of the U.S. If you missed last Friday's show with Fred Minnick, the on-demand replay is available now at the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. We'll have the podcast version out later this week. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society's U.S. chapter has tastings with Charles McLean in 5 different cities this week, starting with New York City Monday night and wrapping up in Los Angeles on Friday. The Whiskey Exchange's virtual edition of the Whiskey Show Old and Rare starts Friday and runs through the weekend. The Malmö Beer and Whiskey Festival is also this weekend in Sweden. Whiskey Magazine's annual awards dinner is on March 24th in London, and the Noord-Nederland Whiskey Festival is March 25th through the 27th in Groningen, the Netherlands. The Hong Kong Whiskey Festival is that same weekend, and tickets are still available for Whiskey and Barrel Night in Tampa, Florida, April 7th. Remember, all in-person events are still subject to change on short notice, and you may have to show proof of vaccination or a recent negative COVID test in order to attend. The calendar of events is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the new buyvirginiarye.com site for more details, and please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. It's a long, long way from Midleton to Minnesota, but Brian Nation and his family made the move last year. Brian stepped down as Midleton's master distiller to join the new O'Shaughnessy Distilling Company in Minneapolis to make its Keeper's Heart whiskeys. The first release, Keeper's Heart Irish American Whiskey, is a blend of Irish whiskey with sourced U.S. rye whiskey, and went on the market last summer in the U.S. while Brian distills future releases. I spent some time on a Zoom call with Brian this week while he was on vacation with his family. So have the kids forgiven you yet for moving them from Dublin to Minneapolis in the middle of winter?
Well, Mark, to be quite honest with you, they're really enjoying it, which is so much, makes it so much easier for me as well. They have, they've really got into the winter sports. They're skiing. They love watching ice hockey. They're actually getting used to being out in the cold now as well because they've no other choice, really. It's been quite a cold winter, but they're really enjoying it, which is fantastic for us, you know.
How have you adjusted to it, though?
To be honest with you, Mark, I'm actually loving it. It's such a great transition for me. You know, I really love what we're doing. I really love the challenge of building a brand from the ground up and actually getting the distillery up and running and producing all of our new different distillates. It's really exciting. So the adjustment has been great.
But this, I think, will probably be, the first St. Patrick's Day that you haven't been in Ireland in years?
It'll be the first time ever that I haven't been in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day. So it's going to be strange. It's also going to be exciting to see the way it's celebrated in America. I've only ever seen it on TV. So really looking forward to seeing how it's celebrated in the US. There's so much excitement and anticipation about it. It's been brilliant. And it's actually a very special day for us because it's the second anniversary of the day we broke ground. And it's really the first St. Patrick's Day that we'll be able to celebrate with Keeper's Heart. So really excited about the party and the fun we're going to have on the day.
Give us an example of what you guys are going to be doing on Thursday.
So the first thing is, and something I've never done before either, is we're actually going to be marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Secondly, we're going to be going around doing different bar events in different locations within St. Paul and Minneapolis. And effectively, that will be just showcasing Keeper's Heart. And then we have a party back at the distillery where we're inviting everybody to come and just have a bit of fun with us and share a drink of Keeper's Heart.
How has the whiskey been received so far?
It's been great. There's been a lot of positive reaction. everybody that gets the opportunity to taste it is really surprised by the layered impact that both the combination of the Irish whiskey and the American whiskey together brings. There's been a lot of excitement around it as well in terms of the versatility of the whiskey. So we've had a very, very positive feedback around it. And the one thing that, is great, when people have the chance to taste it, they really do enjoy the complex, balanced nature of the whiskey and really enjoy the flavor as well.
Now, when are you going to be coming out with different expressions? Because I know that you had some plans for it.
Yeah, so we have a number. We've actually started what's called a single barrel program at the moment, where we've actually taken Keeper's Heart and actually finished it in different type barrels and offered it to off-premise locations. And effectively, that's created a lot of interest. We launched it initially in Minneapolis or Minnesota, and now we're branching out to all of the states that we're in. And these are currently with finishes like finishing in virgin American oak, refill rye, stout barrels, maple barrels. But we also have some resting now in wine barrels, particularly, Pinot Noirs, Zinfandel, Sauternes, PX and Madeira. So we have a lot of excitement around that. And we're working on a number of new expressions as well, which we're slightly keeping close to our chest at the moment, but looking forward to see what's going to happen with the with the reaction to our consumers when they get to taste it.
What has been the biggest difference for you in moving from a massive distillery the size of Midleton with 2 separate still houses to a small artisanal distillery?
I think, Mark, the biggest difference for me has been around the whole kind of starting from the ground up and really getting to develop your taste profile for the distillery itself. That doesn't just happen by accident. You have to work hard at it to ensure that you actually want to develop the taste profile that is really effectively not been done before in terms of it's a new distillery, it's a new brand. So you have the opportunity to tweak the taste profile to get it to exactly the way you want it. So that has been challenging, but it has also been really, really fun. And then I suppose it's also, the amount of hands-on detail you have to do in terms of growing the brand, getting out into market, meeting everybody. I love that. I love building the relationships in the different states. And, that side of it where you're completely hands-on in all aspects of the business, from production all the way through to marketing and sales. I just absolutely love it.
How much do you miss Midleton, though? Because, you grew up there as a distiller.
I did. I grew up there. And as I've said to you before, very proud of everything that we achieved as a team there. I miss a lot of the guys, to be honest with you. I have great relationships with the guys still, and I'd be in regular contact with them. At the end of the day, people make the place. And to be honest, when you're able to keep up the relationships and the friendships with the people from Midleton, that makes it that much easier. I love where I am now. I love the new friends and new relationships that I've developed. But I'm always, I'm regularly in contact with the likes of Kevin and other people from the distillery. So, from that point of view, that's what you miss when you move from a place. You miss the people. And they are great. There are great people at Midleton, and keeping up that relationship has been important for me.
Give me a sense of how you're going to define success 5-10 years from now with Keeper's Heart and O'Shaughnessy Distilling.
The definition of success for me will be seeing people not just in Minnesota or the US enjoying Keeper's Heart. It will be great to be able to hopefully go back to Ireland and see people enjoying Keeper's Heart in the bars in Ireland, across internationally, because our goal is to become an international brand. And as I think we have the quality, I think we have the capabilities to actually do that. So for me, success will be people enjoying our whiskies and effectively enjoying a new style of whiskey when we bring out our self-distilled whiskies, where you're looking at this American whiskey produced in the Irish style.
At that point, will you stop blending with Irish whiskey, or will you keep blending the Irish whiskey in with what you're distilling?
No, our intention, Mark, just so that we understand it, is that our Keeper's Heart, which is a totally sourced whiskey at the moment, Keeper's Heart Irish American, that will continue to be blended even beyond when our self-distilled whiskies are ready to release. What we're going to do is all of our self-distilled whiskies will actually be released under the brand of Keeper's Heart, but will be SKUs on their own or will be whiskies on their own. Our intention, Mark, will be to continue to preserve the relationship with Great Northern Distillery and continue to source our Irish whiskey from them. So we have actually laid down stocks going forward to ensure that supply is available for our demand. And we also will preserve the relationship with MGP and continue to source our rye whiskey from them going forward. So Keeper's Heart Irish American will always be a sourced whiskey. And all of our other whiskies, our self-distilled whiskies, will come under Keeper's Heart brand, but will be whiskies on their own.
What's the biggest thing that you've had to adjust to since moving to running your own distillery? Is it doing the blending yourself too, or do you have a team to do that? Before you had Billy Layton and Dave McCabe to worry about the blending part of things, but now that you're all on your own, are you doing it yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would be responsible for the blending, but having the likes of David Perkins, who's our liquid collaborator, and obviously a great, experience in blending himself, having him on board with us and having his input and having his advice has been invaluable, to be honest with you, particularly on the American whiskey side. So that relationship is live and going well, and he's a great guy to work with. He just brightens everybody's day when he walks into a room, and I have great fun with him as well. So in terms of aspects like that and understanding the way a business runs, particularly through the 3-tier system in the US, that is something that I would have never come across before. David has been invaluable in kind of walking us through that. And obviously the experience we have with our CEO, Mike Duggan, who's ex-Phillips and also Diageo, and Paddy Caulfield, who's obviously from Pernod Ricard, North America, and Jameson before that. All of these guys coming together as a team, we have a lot of learning to do, but we're also willing to take the help. But we also have a lot of experience as well. So that's actually making it such an enjoyable journey as well, because you're learning something new every day. And for me, I think I've said this to you many times before, every day is a school day. And I just love all of that aspect of it as well.
You'll find my tasting notes for Keeper's Heart Irish American Whiskey in the tasting notes section at whiskycast.com. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Ireland's Kinsale Spirit Company just unveiled the latest in its series of whiskies dedicated to the Battle of Kinsale back in 1601 and 1602. Spanish Earl single malt is finished in a combination of Jamaican Appleton rum and Imperial Stout casks after spending its first 4 years in ex-bourbon barrels. It's bottled at 43% ABV. The nose is malty and complex with notes of citrus fruits, orange peel, lemon zest, a touch of ginger, dried grass clippings, milk chocolate, and brown sugar. The taste has a lot of chocolate and citrusy character, touches of chocolate-covered oranges, dried fruits, and hints of rum, figs, and raisins. The finish is long and gentle. I'm scoring the Spanish Earl single malt from Kinsale Spirit Company a 91. I tasted that one as part of a St. Patrick's Day tasting Thursday organized by the Irish Whiskey Association, along with the Natterjack Irish Whiskey bottled by Gortonor Distillers. It's a 4-year-old Irish blend bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has touches of straw, caramel, vanilla, dried fruits, and a hint of citrus. The citrus comes out on the palate with tropical fruits, along with soft spices, caramel, vanilla, and a hint of straw. The finish is long and dry with a hint of citrus, and I'm scoring the Natterjack Irish Whiskey an 88. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you each week by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. They're reviving the tradition of Maryland-style rye at their Baltimore farm and waterfront distillery. They're offering WhiskyCast listeners a free virtual guided tasting when you purchase a bottle from your local retailer. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com and use the code word WhiskyCast, and a Sagamore Spirit teammate will guide you through the whiskey. Please drink responsibly. Longtime Tullamore Dew brand ambassador Tim Herlihy now has his own whiskey. He created the Lost Irish Whiskey as a tribute to the Irish diaspora around the world. It's a blend of Irish grain, malt, and pot still whiskeys, finished in 7 different types of casks from 6 different countries, including South African brandy and Japanese Mizunara, just to name a couple of them. It's bottled at 40% ABV, and the nose is almost as complex as the cask list. There are touches of lemongrass, sandalwood, honey, straw, soft oak, and hints of baking spices. The taste is thick and viscous with subtle baking spices and notes of pine, figs, dates, sandalwood, honey, and vanilla. The finish, well, it's long and fruity with a touch of spice. The only thing I'd change about this one is the bottling strength. Personally, I'd love to see what it tastes like at 46%. But Tim Herlihy has created an excellent debut with Lost Irish. I'm scoring it a 92. Let's wrap up with a bottled-in-bond rye whiskey, the Distiller's Reserve from Virginia's KO Distilling. It's matured for 4 years and 7 months, and of course it's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose is full of baking spices, along with touches of black cherries, peaches, and a soft oakiness. The taste has black cherries complemented by cinnamon, clove, and allspice notes, along with hints of peaches, red apples, caramel, and vanilla underneath. The spices linger nicely on the finish with a good balance, and I'm scoring the KO Distilling Distiller's Reserve Bottled-in-Bond Rye a 90. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 3,300 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
While there are several claims to the first highball in the United States, Dewar's is certainly amongst them. The highball trend was born and proliferated in Japan as a more sessionable and alternative approach to enjoying whiskey. Sure, neat or perhaps with a drop of water or two is the best way to enjoy whiskey, but it isn't always the most refreshing. With infinite spins and twists on this relatively simple cocktail, it's important to start with premium ingredients. Our latest innovations like Dewar's 8-year Caribbean rum cask finish or our 8-year Mizunara cask finish are both complex, double-aged whiskeys that will stand up to the chill of ice and effervescence of soda nicely. The base recipe is simple, but the trick is temperature. Fill a chilled Collins glass with ice. Add 2 ounces of your favorite Dewar's over the ice, top with club soda right from the fridge, and lastly, throw in a lemon wedge or peel and serve. More time in the sun, less behind the bar. Curious? Begin with a basic highball recipe, then start experimenting based on your personal taste and flavor preferences. Sky's the limit.
Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, presented by Scarabus Isla Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Ian Bruce posed a question during our Happy Hour live webcast Friday night with Fred Minnick that we never got around to addressing, so let's take a crack at it here. Could a distillery or parent company set up their own retail branch? I believe Glenfiddich have done something as an online store. Well, Ian, I believe you're asking specifically about the U.S., given the context of the discussion the other night. And with the exception of states that allow so-called craft distillers to sell directly to consumers within their state, the answer is generally no. That's one of the legacies from the end of Prohibition, when the federal and state governments wanted to keep drinks companies from selling directly to consumers. So they required wholesalers to work as middlemen between the producers and the retailers. You will see distillery websites offering online sales in the U.S., but they link to a separate retail website like ReserveBar.com or one of its competitors that gets its whiskeys through a wholesale distributor to comply with the laws. Outside of the U.S., though, distilleries are free to do whatever local laws allow in each country where they want to operate, and they do sell directly to consumers in those countries where they can. Ian, I hope that answers your question. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, whether it's a question, a comment, or a suggestion, you can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Scarabus, the unique Islay single malt forged by the whiskey-making traditions of 3 generations of the Lang family. Look for it at specialist whiskey shops worldwide and your local Total Wine & More store in the U.S. Find out more at hunterlang.com. Let's close now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and other things that make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Sustainable distilling doesn't just focus on the ingredients that go into making a whiskey, but what you do with the stuff that's left over, namely the spent grains left over after mashing and fermenting. That's one of the topics up for discussion this week at the James B. Beam Institute's annual conference for distillers at the University of Kentucky. Traditionally, spent grains have often been sold or given to farmers to use as cattle feed, but with the boom in craft distilling, especially with the growth of urban distilleries, there's now more spent grains being produced than farmers can use. It's one of the things Castle and Key master blender Brett Connors has had to look at as he and his colleagues ramp up production at their historic distillery, since the old options are no longer an option.
Historically, you had a myriad of cattle farms in the area, and you had a lower density of overall distillery production, so a lot of your spent grains were being used to feed cattle farms. You know, even E.H. Shaler is a great example of that, where Ashford Stud now lives at Bulmore up the road. That was a cattle farm he had, and he would drive his cattle down to a cattle barn, which is now where Warehouse B lives, to feed his cattle his spent grains in the winter. Where now, you know, that's definitely one of our challenges, is often you're paying farmers to drive up and haul your grains for you, where historically it was free to have that occur. So now we're looking at secondary options for, well, how do you effectively dry those grains or, you know, reduce the moisture content to them where they can then be sold or topographically applied. You can often, you know, redose protein and you can do some other stuff to them. But currently, you know, we're also trying to be like ecologically considerate with that solution. So the massive natural gas dryer systems are kind of on the way out in the industry, I think. They're very expensive to run. They're very large. You know, I think like 1792 is an example of that. Like they have some massive ones over there. But for us, we're looking at, you know, basically triple lagoon systems or different drying systems with anaerobic, you know, bacterial production and stuff. So the KDA has a big push now that they're really working with a bunch of different research universities, especially agricultural research universities like the University of Kentucky with the Jim Beam Institute. That's the big question mark, is we all want to make more, but we have waste products. So how do we appropriately dispose of our waste in a considerate way? And if you dry it out, you can put it on fields, and it's great for corn production. And you can sell it as cattle feed too.
Is it alkaline or acidic when it comes out?
It's relatively acidic when it comes out because it's going to be at the end of your fermentation. You know, that's one of those considerations too. Like, are you redosing or how are you doing your co-separation to get it to where you want it to be? But I could check our logs, actually, if that would help.
I'm just curious if you had to make it more pH neutral so it doesn't screw up the soil when you spread it on a field.
That's a good question. That's why we're working with the University of Kentucky to figure those things out. I don't mean to punt on you, but I think that's why we are trying to find partnerships with experts in those fields to make sure that we're creating a good that's most viable for those utilizing it. You know, when you're doing kind of that stream or final use of good, I think it's really important to be cognizant about the end user. Just the way we are with whiskey. I want you to enjoy what we pour. So,
I was at Castle and Key this week for a visit as part of a press trip organized by the distillery, and we'll have more from Castle and Key next time around. Of course, full editorial control over the content of this segment remains with WhiskyCast. If you have something you'd like to see us look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, a rare style of Irish whiskey with a creative twist. A unique triple distilled blend of single pot still and single malt premium Irish whiskies. Writer's Tears Copper Pot. Do you dare to be creative?
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address, comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, people always ask me, does Redbreast go better with ice or without? Would it go well with figs, dark chocolate, apple crumble? Is there one particular thing I should enjoy it with? I tell them, yeah, other people.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Classic Scotch cocktails are making a resurgence, and the Dewar's Highball is a great way to brighten up some of your favorite Scotch whiskey. Dewar's, ice, club soda, and a citrus garnish is all you need. Happy sailing. Cheers.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.